The Church at 1002 is a weekly preaching series designed to help you translate the unchanging gospel in an ever-changing world. These messages will help you navigate the challenges of life with the truth of Scripture so that you can live out the way of Jesus in the places you live, work, and play, and allow the world to experience the hope of the gospel through your life. If you find these messages helpful, then subscribe to our channel, like the message, and share it with someone else that needs to experience the unchanging gospel for their ever-changing world. Welcome to the Church at 1002.
Free food gets me every time. I don't know if it's from being part of a big family or just being human. The free samples, free snacks, whatever it is, that's all you gotta have to get me there. Hey, I'm Pastor Ethan Luhman from Concordia Lutheran Church. I'm glad to be joining you at Church at 1002. I'm really thankful for Pastor Matt and all he's doing and for inviting me along for what you're doing and for how you're living church, wherever you happen to be. As we dive in today in John chapter 6, we see a kind of a human issue, a human problem, this well, I'll take anything that's free. So when I was a pastor in New York, I was in New York for 3 years, and while I was there, my church was like a donation spot for Panera bread leftovers. So Sunday morning, we'd have bags of leftover bread and baguettes and bagels, and it was like the mother lode, right? Especially since I was one of the first people there. I got the first dibs on the best bagels. You know, I didn't overdo it, but I tell you, I definitely hit some carbo loading sessions there on Sunday mornings. It got to be a little bad sometimes. A couple cinnamon crunch bagels and the holiday cookies or whatever it is, and start to nod off a little bit during a church service from a little too much sugar. Well, that's where these people find themselves in John chapter 6. Let me read just a short section of that. We're gonna talk about all of chapter 6 verses 1 through 14 today. It starts out this way. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now, as we talk about what's going on here, it's important to recognize that this is happening at the time of Passover. Passover was a big Jewish holiday. It was a celebration of family. It was a celebration of faith. And they were coming together around what? A meal. Yes, everyone went to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, where they ate the roast lamb and they ate the unleavened bread and they drank the wine and ate the bitter herbs and the hard-boiled egg, and they celebrated as a family what God had done and looked forward to the day when God would again release them from slavery. But this time, as the Passover draws near, they're not yet in Jerusalem. Where are they? They're with Jesus. See, because we gather where important things happen at important times. And where we spend our time shows us what we think is important. So these people, they wanted to be close to Jesus because they saw he was doing amazing things. He was doing incredible things. He was doing miracles, healing the sick. And if we sat with ourselves for a moment and said where we spend our time is what we think is important, if we step back for a minute, we could ask ourselves, well, how am I spending my time? Where do I find myself most of the time? Am I at kids' sporting events? Am I at the bar? Am I always at work? Where do I find myself? And am I aware of these things being my priority over other things? You know, do I tell myself that my family is my priority, but I'm spending all my time at work? Do I tell myself that my work's a priority, but I'm actually spending a lot of time out on the town? If we look at where we spend our time, we're going to find what's most important to us, what we're wrapped up in. You know, and this is the interesting thing about Jesus, right? As we see these people following him and trying to be close to him, we got to reflect on the reality that Jesus is willing to go anywhere to be with his disciples. Jesus, he doesn't care where people are. If they're partying, if they're at work, if they're in the synagogue, if they're out on the Sea of Galilee, right? Wherever they are, Jesus wants to be with his people. And it's not necessarily a matter of place, it's a matter of priority and importance. Where are we putting the priority and importance in our own lives? Because here's the reality. Our hunger is not merely for food, right? Our hunger is for something that's going to fill us up more than bread in our belly. We're looking for something that's going to give us meaning. We're looking for something that's going to give us hope, something that's going to get us through the hard times. And where we're looking for fulfillment will show us what we're craving. Are we craving approval from a boss? Are we craving affection and love from a special someone? Are we craving that attaboy? What is it that we're looking for? What are we hoping for will satisfy, what will fill us up on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, on an experiential level? Do I need to see this or go there or lead this or win that? What are we actually craving? What is our soul hungry for? Money, status, new job, new relationship, having kids, getting that degree, fill in the blank. It works for a while, but we wind up hungry again. The thing about all these is the hunger comes back. We can have that kid, we can have that relationship, we can get that job, we can have the most success, but once we get it, the feeling is fleeting. We're craving that serotonin rush again. Well, Jesus meets these people in the midst of that, and he actually invites them to find their fulfillment in him. And this is how. In verse 4 of John chapter 6, it says, the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Verse 5, lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, one of his disciples, where are we going to buy bread so that these people may eat? He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip answered him, 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. And now 200 denarii is basically a day's wages. That was what a denarius was. So 200 days' wages. Working for 200 days, he's saying, wouldn't even be enough money to give all these people just a little bit of bread. So this is what Jesus does, right? He tests Philip with this question about faith and service, and Philip answers in the most human way we can imagine. Jesus, are you crazy? We've all been there, right? There's no way we can do this. There's no way we can meet this need. We look at our budget sometimes and like, I don't know if there's any way we can make this work. Or we look at our work situation, we're like, I don't know if we can make this. Or we look at our family, what our goals are. Man, how can we do what God is calling us to? And the thing about Jesus is that he challenges our presuppositions. He begs us to ask the question, what do we think Jesus is capable of? And do we actually believe Jesus is capable of feeding all these people? Do we believe Jesus could actually do something like this? Where do we actually trust God, and where do we question his ability to work and to act? What are the things, right, that you believe are too much for God to handle? Because we don't always trust God to provide. Yeah, maybe he can answer a prayer or two, but feed 5,000 people? Maybe he can make sure I get to work on time, but give me a job where I feel fulfilled. Maybe he can do this small ask, but the big thing, sometimes I don't think we trust God to actually follow through with what he says he'll do. Do we think God can release us from these sins, this overwhelming guilt or shame that might be running our lives? Yeah, he can forgive it when I swear, He can forgive me when I act out my anger, but can he forgive those things that no one else knows? Can God actually heal my broken heart? Can God actually save my family? What happens is that Philip isn't the only disciple to respond. Maybe you know the story. If we keep reading though, verse 8, it says, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon's Peter's brother, he said, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many? I love this response of Andrew because he's basically saying, this is what we got, Jesus. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but this is what we've got. 5 loaves of bread for 5,000 people, 2 little fish. Here you go, Jesus, right? And this is really the answer of faith. And coincidentally, Andrew is relying on a child, on his what? His lunch? So it shows this communal need that we have among ourselves, but also what it looks like to respond in faith. It doesn't sound very glamorous, does it? This is what I've got. But this is what we need to hear. Jesus can do more with what you've got than you can do with what you've got. So give it to him. Jesus can do more with what you've got than you can do with what you've got. So give it to him. Be honest about what it is you've got. Don't try to make too much of who you are or what you do or your status or whatever. Just bring it all to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, this is what I've got. I've got this time. I've got this skill. I've got this relationship. This is what I got. And I don't know what it is among so many. I don't know what it is in my workplace. I don't know what it is for my neighborhood. I don't know what it is for my friends, but this is what I've got, Jesus. Can you do something with it? And look around at the other people in your life and see who God has placed there and also what they bring to the metaphorical or literal table, right? Who is there in your life? What little boy is there with something to offer maybe you or others and say, well, this is what we've got together, and hand it over to Jesus. And when we respond in faith, we see the work of God. When we respond in faith, we see the work of God. Because what happens next in the story is that Jesus takes this little boy's lunch. Verse 10, Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 men in number. So then there's also women and children. And Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they'd eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this indeed is the prophet who is to come into the world. Did you see what happened there? Right? Jesus has everyone sit down. He breaks the bread. And I'm wondering, right, as he breaks this bread, he says he then distributes the bread. What does he do? How does he do that? Well, he's literally he's breaking it, keeps breaking the same loaf, keeps breaking the same loaf for 5,000 men and any family that they brought with them. He gives thanks to God and he passes it out. And it's more than enough. Not only does it meet their need, it says they ate as much as they want and they collected leftovers. So when we give what we've got to Jesus, he's able to meet the needs of everyone in the room and have leftovers. And we have to remember what Jesus said here at the end. He says, gather up the leftovers so that nothing may be lost. See, Jesus isn't even going to let these leftovers go to waste. He's got a basket for each one of his disciples. They're all going to be eaten for quite some time. Jesus meets our needs and more. And this is what is counterintuitive to us as humans, right? Because when we see things get broken, they get consumed. They get used up. Right? But when Jesus breaks things, he creates more things. When Jesus breaks the bread, he creates more bread. When Jesus breaks his body, he creates life for all people everywhere. When Jesus breaks things, they get multiplied. We see division, we see loss, we see breakdown when things get broken. but Jesus sees multiplication. Jesus creates more than we can. Things get consumed, but the more things are broken in the kingdom of God, the more that's created. And this isn't just about the bread. This is about our lives too. When our lives are handed over to Christ and they're broken for His sake, they're used up. I mean, we might feel empty. We might feel like, you might right now feel like you have nothing to offer anyone in your life. And you got to hold on to what little bit you have so you can make it through this day. But what Jesus is inviting us to do is say, this is all I've got, Jesus, and I'm going to give it to you because you can do more with it than I ever could. And I hope that you know that Jesus can take whatever you've got and make it more than you can. And not only more than you can, He can multiply that in the lives of other people. And He can even meet all your needs and more with what you've got. Because Jesus is bringing Himself into that moment. Jesus is bringing His life into that moment. You will find satisfaction in Christ. Jesus can and will meet all your needs and more. He'll meet all your wants. I knew something had to change in New York. When I was a pastor, I had to change my relationship to these Panera bagels because I wasn't being fully present as I ate a bagel before service or a cookie or whatever. I don't even remember what I ate, but this is what I had to decide to do. I had to decide to start fasting on Sunday mornings, to look at all the goodies there and say, I'm not eating any of them. And it was then that I started fasting on Sunday mornings. I stopped eating for the sake of the work of God. Instead of going after the food that was there, the free meal, I waited for the real free meal. I waited for the body and blood of Christ, that little bit of bread, that little bit of wine that we would eat together, that actually doesn't take our life, that doesn't take our energy, but gives life. See, Jesus has offered us a meal, His body, His blood, this bread, this wine. He's offered us the Passover meal free of charge. He's the host. He's the one who's given it all for us, and He's invited us to His table. Come to Christ's table. Take stock of what you've got and show it to Jesus and share your great need. And if you're really ready, I want you to join me in this prayer. Break what I've got, Jesus, and create more in me and more for others. Break what I've got and let me see your power on display, not mine. Let me see your energy on display, not mine. This is what I've got, God, and I give it to you. As we conclude our time together today, I really hope you can pray that prayer to Jesus together. But I also want you to focus on these 3 questions. First, how did you see God at work in this text? The second question to consider is, what are the things you believe are too hard for Jesus to handle? What are those things you're not quite ready to give Him? You can't quite trust Him with yet. What are those things that you believe are too hard for Jesus to handle? Third, who in your life has shared what they have with you? Who's been like that little boy ready to give over his 5 loaves and 2 fish? Who in your life has shared what they have with you? And conversely, same part of that, who are you sharing your life with? Those would be some good questions for you to gather around. And thanks again for joining us at Church at 1002. You can follow us YouTube, Instagram, you subscribe and get plugged in. It's been really great to be here with you today. God bless you.